The ICC and Africa. The Kenyan election in 2013 was seen by many as a referendum on the ICC and Western interference in Kenyan affairs and African affairs as a whole. Others suspected the result was rigged. The election pitted Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto's Jubilee coalition against pre-election favourite Raila Odinga's Coalition for Reforms and Democracy. The tendency for Kenyans to vote in ethnic blocs meant that in order to win, alliances between ethnic groups had to be formed. Kenyatta and Ruto represent an alliance between two of the nation's biggest ethnic groups, the Kikuyu and Kalenjin, while Odinga's Luo allied with the Kamba and other coastal groups, but they were unable to rally sufficient numbers of ethnic bloc votes to win. Charges against the current president Kenyatta and his vice president Ruto stem from the violence that broke out after the disputed 2007 elections. More than 1,000 people were killed and 600,000 forced from their homes. The two men were on opposing sides of the conflict, and many saw their alliance in 2013 as one of convenience, their goal being to avoid prosecution from the ICC. The ICC was created with the noble aim of bringing justice to those responsible for the worst crimes committed in the world, the operative word being world and not just Africa. Its participants fund it, with contributions being decided roughly by wealth. The European countries account for about 60% of this. Since its creation, the ICC has indicted 30 people from 8 countries, all in Africa. It was 10 years before the court made its first conviction, finding Thomas Lubanga Diallo guilty of war crimes in the eastern DRC. These statistics have led to criticisms of anti-African bias. The extent of the selective justice is highlighted by the fact that the court has had over 8,000 complaints for crimes in at least 139 countries to look into, but has only acted on cases in Africa. The African Union is among the leading critics of the ICC. Its chair and Ethiopian Prime Minister, Haile Desalegn, said, "African leaders came to the consensus that the ICC process conducted in Africa has a flaw. The intention was to avoid any kind of impunity, but now the process has degenerated to some kind of race hunting." Rwandan President Paul Kagame has added the ICC was put in place for African countries, and similar accusations have come from other African heads of state. The court's credibility is further damaged by charges of the lack of evidence and dubious methods used to gather it, such as the case in Kenya. The speed with which the ICC launched an investigation in Libya after a referral from the UN Security Council has led to criticisms that the court targets individuals that upset Western interests. The political agendas of Washington, London and Paris have played out on the African continent for centuries now, and the ICC is seen as another way of emasculating Africa whilst ignoring the crimes, abuses and aggression of others. It's seen to have increasingly become a tool to accomplish the foreign policy goals of the US and its allies through its growing relationship with the UN Security Council and its arbitrary use of the referral powers. This Western partisan justice has played out in biases even within Africa, turning a blind eye to pro-US regimes. The Ugandan academic, Professor Mahmoud Mamdani, says, "The ICC's attempted accommodation with the powers that be has changed the international face of the court. Its name notwithstanding, the ICC is rapidly turning into a Western court to try African crimes against humanity. Even then, the approach is selective. It targets governments that are adversaries of the US and ignores US allies, effectively conferring impunity on them. This further complicates the view of the ICC in Africa. It is at once overzealous and not doing enough. The court has been weak outside of Africa, because whilst Africa is the most represented region, there are a lot of non-signatories operating beyond the court's remit in other regions, most notably key international players China, Russia, the US, India, Pakistan and Israel are not state parties to the court. Recently, there has been a conscious move to look beyond Africa to prosecute and improve the ICC's image in Africa. Gambia's Fatou Bensouda was installed as chief prosecutor after heavy lobbying from the AU, and investigations into places such as Colombia, Georgia, the Republic of Korea and Afghanistan signals the ICC is truly becoming international. Though there is still the glaring omission of the global superpowers and their allies on this list. Bensouda has said, "It is the victims we are representing." And this is the most important thing to remember. The crimes that the accused are charged with are very serious, and it shouldn't matter where they are committed. Though Africa does not have a monopoly on violence, the reality is that there are a lot of atrocities that fit the ICC's criteria happening on the continent. Many African countries lack the capacity to deal with some of the cases domestically, leading to self-referrals as the ICC acts as the court of last resort. So, it is up to the states to improve their judiciaries and uphold the rule of law domestically, or else the actions of Africans will continue to be judged outside of Africa. Most importantly, the victims of the crimes need justice, and African political elites can no longer be immune to prosecution. The geographic imbalance remains a highly curious matter, and the ICC is not above criticism itself. It clearly has its deficiencies, for example the large number of non-signatories crippling its credibility and its reliance on the states to deliver war criminals, while many are not inclined to do so, show it needs more might. The court will continue to be accused of threatening sovereignty, being racist and behaving neo-colonially, especially by those it investigates, and African heads of state believe they have a legitimate gripe. One solution to the perceived biases of the ICC has seen Kenya recently pass a motion to leave the court, and a similar move has been made by the AU for the remaining African states to withdraw unanimously.